Okay. Well, in lieu of our chair being here at this point to start the meeting, I would ask Counselor Hamilton. I see Director Thomas here for with representing the controller. Do we know if Director Gray will be here today or not?
I'm not sure whether she'll be here today.
Okay, because I had thought, at least initially, that since the area in which there was some common interest between the three commissioners was the personnel area, that we might focus on personnel questions today. Um, Commissioner Bobo, how would you like to proceed in the circumstances?
Um, she either might be running late, the director, Sonia Gray, or might be double booked. So perhaps we can either revisit our original proposal or maybe kind of deliberate and discuss over some of the questions that we have.
Uh-huh.
I think it's probably, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we have another meeting later in the month on the 27th, so I can ask her if she's available then to respond to questions that you might have.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there are enough questions that we would value having some extra time with her to be able to get through them.
Okay. I will make that outreach.
Uh-huh. One of the things that I'm interested in having to do with our bundles is that in doing some research, I found that that the city of New York has a rather detailed Office of Public Advocate. And I'm wondering if it's possible to organize a meeting with a chief administrator or someone in that department that office, which is a publicly elected office, that would enable those of us who are interested in the possibility of making changes and adding that position and reworking the E&A. I'd like to hear from someone who's got some experience in a department like that, the pluses and minuses, what if they had to do over again, they would do differently, etc. And so if we could, and that might be a meeting that, because there was more than one work group that was interested in the question of E&A, that we might invite the entire group of commissioners as opposed to just this work group too. What do you think of that, Commissioner Bobo and Councilor Hamilton?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think as we're kind of shoring up some of our recommendations for the charter amendments and proposals and things of that nature, doing our due diligence in terms of research where possible, asking those types of questions, because I think, at least from my perspective, my main objective at this point is really understanding the pros and cons of kind of what it looks like in real life. At this point, we are pulling together our final recommendations, and obviously hearing from the public and things of that nature. I do think that it would be great for us to hear from an Office of Public Advocate who is doing the work and has either transitioned from a system similar to ours. I think that would be great information and intel to gather.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes, Commissioner Crossland, I do have a question for more so clarification. Your thoughts around the Office of Public Advocate, you just mentioned in your opening statement that it would be to rethink E&A. Is it your intentions to rethink E&A with the Office of Public Advocate, or is it the Comptroller's office in her position? I just want to clarify.
The bundles that were previewed a couple of weeks ago in the last commissioners meeting included a potential bundle to actually replace the E&A with a new structure that would have three components to it: the legislative structure, the executive structure and to replace the controller's office then with a public advocate structure. With the current responsibilities within the controller's office being divided within the public advocate's office and into a new finance division that would become a part of the executive branch.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, unless I'm just not all the way
Right.
understanding, the
Right. And
comptroller's
yeah.
position is a function of ENA, one of three, but not the entire, that is not her entire position. Am I understanding you, that you understand that part?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I think we will reach out to the New York Office of Public Advocate regarding meeting with Workgroup 3. If you would like to call a special meeting of the entire commission, that you need 3 members, so you just need 1 additional member to join in your under your rules of order and procedure. 3 members of the commission can call a special meeting.
Okay. One of the voting members, then you're saying?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that there'll be others that'll be interested in hearing from them as well. So we'll certainly check and get back to that. But in the meantime, if you could go ahead and reach out with the idea that it would be for this work group, and then we can add as appropriate. Commissioner Bobo, are there any other individuals like that that you can think of that might be pertinent to the actual stage at which we are during this development process?
Not off the top of my head. I'll have to give that additional thought. I think the New York City version of public advocate is kind of top of mind right now, just thinking through what it could look like for us here in the city of St. Louis. I do think it's important to even consider what an election might look like for an office of public advocate. And also, I think we had some questions, and this is why it would be helpful to hear from the New York City office, is just understanding how that kind of ties in with the city council as well, and how that delineation of authority kind of works.
Right.
So,
And it appears from their charter, I did get a look at their portion of the charter, Charter 24 in New York City. I did take a quick look at it, and there are sections that are very clear about what parts of different what might be within boards and commissions right now of the city of St. Louis, what parts of those they have actually folded into the Office of Public Advocate. And so hearing from them about where it has worked and where it hasn't, I guess they've been operating this thing for 30, 40 years. And so they've got a fair amount of experience right now that could be useful to us in terms of determining what might or might not work in our circumstance. Maybe Councilor Hamilton, maybe you could give us a sense of what other special meetings at this point might be on the horizon, so that we don't duplicate that as we head into this later stretch. What might be the more pertinent pieces of information that we need to gather at this point?
Well, there has been a special meeting request for sent out to several different professors at local universities. Those individuals have not responded to that invitation. There has been a request for a special meeting with the Kansas City Charter Commission. And I believe there was one other that is not jumping top of mind as far as requests for special meetings that the chair has submitted. But that is my memory of what has already been requested.
All right, so it doesn't sound like there's duplication, at least among what we're thinking of at this point. my own personal feeling right now is that we need to really begin to start vetting some of these proposals that are basically just sentences and paragraphs, and figuring out which ones of them might make more sense than others, so that we can then focus on where we want to spend more of our time in depth to learn about different proposals and which ones we want to prioritize, et cetera. And so to the extent that we can identify speakers that will help us move that process along, I would think that it would be beneficial, not just to our work group, but to all of the work groups. Well, yes, go ahead.
I did have an additional question for your bundle dealing with the Office of Public Advocate. Other than the name public advocate and assuming that their accountability would be to the people as a elected office, what would be the difference in its accountability than the elected office of the comptroller currently? So I know you're trying to figure out a way to strengthen accountability through all offices. And so it is my understanding that you're replacing, or at least attempting to replace, the comptroller's office with the Office of Public Advocate with a couple functionality changes. But where in that change will you strengthen accountability if it's also an elected public office?
Yeah. Well, it is inherent to the function itself that accountability would be strengthened in a couple of ways, more than a couple of ways. But the main ways, number one, is that by separating out the fiscal function from the audit function, you no longer have one entity that basically would be auditing itself. Instead, the fiscal function itself would move to the executive branch, so that the audit function, which would be in the Office of Public Advocate, would be able to audit both the legislative and the executive branch, rather than auditing themselves in terms of fiscal matters. In addition to that, then there would be a variety of other kinds of oversight that is currently placed within the executive branch mainly, which it should probably be pulled out of the executive branch and added to the public advocate's position in order to give it more transparency and accountability. For instance, oversight commissions, for instance, would not be within the executive branch anymore, where in fact they might be oversight commissions of functions of the executive branch, but instead would become part of the public advocate's role itself. So this is a way to be able to separate out the function. There would be subpoena power, for instance, that would be part of the public advocate's office, so that office then would be able to regularly review and provide that oversight both for the legislative and the executive portions of city government themselves. So does that help a little bit more to understand how the separation itself might in fact enable more accountability?
It's something to think about, I think, as you guys continue to drill down on your amendments and proposals, that we can have a clearer understanding.
Yeah, and I think that talking with the New York Public Advocate's Office might help all of us to clarify a little bit more of how they have over a period of time. In fact, they probably started with one model, they moved to another model, they now have another model. You know, you don't always have the same one for 40 or 50 years, and I'm very interested in how their thinking evolved about it, and whether they are satisfied with the model they have now, or whether there are things they would change with it or not, so that if we are considering making a change, we have the best history in addition to current kinds of information to be able to consider.
Have you, and you don't have to have an answer today, but just something to think about. have you considered what that office would look like without, let's say, the amendment for a finance department under the mayor not being brought forth on the ballot or being voted for? Have you considered what that looks like without that?
You're suggesting that the finance department would not move to the executive branch? Is that what you're asking?
That is a proposal for the ballot, correct?
Huh? We don't have proposals for the ballot yet. We're considering these different options. And at some point, there will be proposals for the ballot. But yes, there is one. There are a couple of options that we're considering already. One of the working groups is looking at a proposal where in fact there would not be a change in the E&A and how it's presently structured. That is one of the proposals that's being considered. There are a couple, as I said, different proposals that we're looking at right now, and we haven't decided, quite frankly, what makes the most sense for St. Louis. That's what we're looking for at the end is what makes the most sense for St. Louis.
I think I was just looking more so forward that, with the considered proposals, which ones would be okay if they stood alone without the other proposal from another working group is more so.
Right.
So
Oh,
just
okay.
something to consider, because if the idea is to separate out the auditing function from the financial function, what if that financial function is not brought under the mayor?
Yeah.
So what does that Office of Public Advocate look
We
like?
would have to bundle. If we were going to do that kind of thing, it would have to be a bundle, not an either or, but there would have to be, all of it would have to happen. So it would be an up or a down. If the decision is to replace the E&A with another function, that the other function would have to delineate some of these things so that there wouldn't be, let's say, a finance division that was left out there floating and not have a unit into which it were placed, that kind of a thing. One of the things, in fact, that we're looking at very closely in the middle of all this is unforeseen consequences of some of the moves. Well, if you get rid of this, then this, and this happens, and so it creates a waterfall kind of an effect. And we want to make sure that when we finally move forward, that we have, to the greatest extent possible, foreseen these kinds of situations so that we don't have unexpected consequences.
Okay.
I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that, our public hearing towards the latter part of this month, I think will also provide an opportunity to continue to flesh out some of these thoughts and hear feedback directly from the public regarding some of the things that we've mentioned so far. I know it can be kind of jarring to consider switching up kind of either the E&A board or other things, not only the comptroller, but other offices and responsibilities within the city government, and thinking through how to promote transparency and effectiveness. So the public hearing on March 28th, I think, will also provide additional learnings that we can take and apply to this. I do think that it's worth mentioning and noting, Director Thomas, that essentially, we've had a lot of thought around kind of the Venn diagram of who owns what and for what reason, whether that's audit or finance, setting budgets. So it is worth us considering, and that's, I think, one of the questions that I even noted on our proposal, mine and Commissioner Crossland's proposal is, who could this also impact further down the road, and who does this impact immediately, and what are the pros and cons of each? So considering how to sharpen our proposal, you've given me a lot of food for thought. I don't necessarily have a question I don't necessarily have an answer to your last question, but definitely something I need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I've definitely posted in the form of a question, because I think that will be either a question that is directly asked or considered by the public, as well as one that is highly considered by our office as well. So not necessarily, shooting down your proposal or
Oh,
anything.
no, yeah.
Definitely just giving, like you said, food for thought to just consider all options,
Mhm,
what might be best short term versus long term, like you said.
mhm, mhm.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for this conversation, because if people don't raise these issues, then we are in a bit of a vacuum in terms of knowing what some of the, what some of the points of confusion might be, where we need to add clarity, where there may be some conflicts that we, aren't aware of, et cetera. And so that's important. Okay. Well, I don't know. I think this may be a short meeting today, from the point of view that that I don't have any other additional questions to raise. Do you, Commissioner Bobo?
No, not at this time. None that we can, I think, address without the director of personnel, at least.
Right, right.
And so being mindful of that, and also being mindful of everyone's
Yeah,
kind of contributions thus far, and giving us a little bit more time, perhaps with the little bit of time we'll have back, just to think through some of those questions posed already.
great.
And I'll just note that we have a couple of members of the public. If you all have anything to add or would like to ask any questions, feel free to raise your hand or use the Q&A function, or whatever means you would like to notify us. We'll give about 60 seconds for that purpose.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't see any hands and I don't see anything in the queue. And oh, it says I have one. It says I'm doing a project on public administration. How have you increased government transparency during your time in your respective positions? This is not, maybe this is a question about how the Charter Commission has been transparent with the public. That's how I would interpret this question. And I would just point to, and then I'll kick it to the commissioners, the voting commissioners. But the Charter Commission has voted to have all of its public comment at all of its regular monthly meetings. It has also voted to have all of its work group meetings public, even though there is not a quorum of the membership at those work group meetings. It allows public comment at the work group meetings. They have also made their meeting packages public. So if you go to the Charter Commission's website, you will see that there are several meeting packets up on their website, as well as their notices and agendas, as well as their rules of order of procedure. They've also got a link to the city charter, a link that allows you to sign up to make public comment at their various meetings, and a link that allows the public to submit its own proposed charter amendments. The Charter Commission also has an email address that is a city charter, I believe, or Charter Commission at stlewis-mo.gov, where the public provides various proposals and has emailed and asked questions and things like that. And those things have been responded to or provided to the working groups. And if I am missing anything, please do tell Commissioners Bobo, Crossland, Ms. Thomas.
I would just add that while the original language, I believe, from the Board of Aldermen stated that we would have 2 public meetings, we're in the process of having the second one, and we are planning to have several more before the end. And so we are certainly reaching out to the public far more frequently than what might have been originally anticipated.
And I do not see any other raised hands or questions.
Well, I would suggest we go ahead and close the meeting for today. Then we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks. And unless we hear differently, we will assume that that Director Gray will be here for that meeting, and that we will focus on some of the personnel issue questions that that arose during the last meeting, and in some thoughts since then.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks,
Thank you.